Hey everybody, how's it going? It's Tyler. Today we're going to do a video about the 12 things that I was completely wrong about when I bought a camper. There's a couple things that I thought about camping that I ended up being wrong about and kind of surprised me once I actually started using my camper and going on trips. So we're going to go over those today. That way, if you're thinking about getting a camper or if you already have a camper, maybe you kind of experience these same things. Let's go over the things that I was kind of surprised about. All right, one strong belief I have with campers especially is that bigger isn't always better. We bought a smaller camper. There's still smaller campers than this, but you can't really get something much smaller that sleeps 4 people. And my belief is that when you're going camping, you're not going camping to hang out in your camper. You're going camping to like get outside, hang out by the campfire, do activities and things like that. You're only in your camper when it's crappy weather or when you're sleeping. So really, the size of the camper shouldn't matter. If you're bringing a giant camper to go camping every time, what's the point? You just get a rental house somewhere. It's kind of silly. But for me, having a smaller camper is actually better. Another big reason why we like having a smaller camper is because 75% of the places that we've camped, besides when we went on our main trip, on our 3-week trip, we can't fit bigger campers there. We camp in a lot of the state parks up in New Hampshire where you can't fit a camper that's bigger than 30 feet. If we had a 30-foot camper, we wouldn't be able to go to many of the places that we like to camp. So a smaller camper for us is much more convenient. Even like I've been up into Vermont and New Hampshire, they have dispersed camping. Those campsites, even this small camper wouldn't be able to work in those campsites. So a smaller camper can be better as long as it fits your needs, but I would definitely go slightly undersized what you think you need versus slightly oversized. So number 2, if your camper isn't super complicated to set up, it takes like 15-20 minutes. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos before I got my camper, kind of just like to learn as much as I could about the actual process of camping. And they always made it seem like the setup and takedown is really complicated. Maybe it's just because I have a really simple camper that it's not the case, but I can set my camper up in 15 minutes pretty much every time, not a problem at all. You basically do the stabilizer jacks, the front jack, just get it semi-level, and then hook up the water and electricity. It's not that hard. I don't know. The videos that I looked had all these gadgets and all this stuff about auto leveling things, and you really don't need it. The setup and takedown really isn't that hard, especially if you're semi-mechanically inclined, which I like to think I am. It's not hard. Don't be scared of that. Don't be intimidated. Sometimes backing it into a tight spot can be a little tricky, but if you have someone out there spotting for you, it's not bad. Don't be worried about that. Related to the setup and takedown, number 3 is that emptying a black tank isn't that bad. I watched videos of it. My preconceived notion was that it was going to be absolutely disgusting and I was going to have to put a clothespin on my nose the whole time just to kind of hold from the smell. I didn't think it was that bad. I've done it a few times. I've done it actually a decent amount of times. It takes 5-10 minutes. I just wear gloves and throw the gloves away afterwards. That way I don't touch poop. Make sure you wash your hands too. But it really doesn't smell that bad. If you do it quick and you do it in the right order, it's not that gross. I don't look forward to it, but it's not like a reason to avoid getting a camper. I don't think it's really that gross. I mean, if you mess up and get poop on the ground, that might suck. That might change your opinion on it. But if you're just like me, you just run the hose, empty the black water first, then the gray water, then hose it down. It's really not all that bad. I was a mechanic for 10 years at an auction, and I used to get into repossessions and have to test drive those, which were much more disgusting than emptying a black tank. So put that in perspective, it's really not that bad. Again, if that's something that's scaring you about camping, it's not bad. Once you do it once or twice, it'll be like second nature. You'll rip right through it. Easy peasy. Don't be afraid. All right, to give you a rundown of kind of how we ended up with this camper and how we started our camping journey, I guess you'd say. I'd been planning a trip to basically drive cross country and go on an adventure for a while. And 2023 was probably our last year to kind of have the freedom to do that because we were going to plan on trying to have a kid soon. So in 2023, I took 3 weeks out of work and we were planning on driving the camper to Montana and a few national parks out west, which I live in Massachusetts, by the way, so that's kind of a bit of a haul. Spring of 2023, we ended up buying this. We tried to go to a dealership, ended up actually purchasing a used Gulfstream Friendship 189 BH, I think it's called. It's the bunkhouse, but it's a 21-foot camper. It's pretty small, but it fit our needs, and that's how we ended up buying this camper, and that was our first camping experience. We used it a couple times before we went on our trip, and then we lived out of this thing for 3 weeks. That's how our camping experience kind of started, so that way you can kind of get an idea. I was completely green to camping, never really, I mean, I've camped in tents and gone to campgrounds and stuff, but never used a camper up until then. 4 is that you don't need a big bag diesel 3500 dually to tow your camper, especially if you have a smaller camper like I do. I tow with a Toyota Tundra with the 5.7 V8. Before I had a 07 Tundra, which is, I actually haven't towed my camper with my new truck now. I have an 18 Tundra, but it's the same thing mechanically. Any 1500 truck should be able to tow most campers up to 10,000 pounds. And obviously you do need a diesel 3500 or at least a 2500 if you have a fifth wheel. But most campers, I see people towing campers with like Subaru Ascents and Toyota Highlanders and stuff. So the idea that you need a really big bad truck to tow your camper is what's preventing you from camping. Look into different options at campers. There's some pretty light ones. That way you don't have to buy a new truck to get a camper. It kind of lowers the barrier to entry. That way you can just get out there and enjoy yourself. You don't need the biggest, baddest truck. My Tundra is more than enough to be able to tow this camper anywhere I want to go. We towed to Montana and back. I did get 11 miles to the gallon. That kind of stinks, but that's just part of towing. You're going to get shitty gas mileage. It just is what it is. But you don't need the biggest, baddest truck, especially if you look into the smaller, lighter campers. They have things like the pop-ups and the A-liners, kind of things like that, which I'm not really a fan of just because of the more things that can go wrong on them. But if you have a smaller vehicle and that's what it's going to take to get you out and camping, and it's either get a small camper or nothing, then get a small camper and use your smaller vehicle to tow. You don't need a big bad tow rig to tow your camper. Definitely not. This is definitely one that surprised me, but it might apply just because of the area that I live in, up in the Northeast in Massachusetts, because there's more people around. So campsites are a lot more expensive than I originally thought, especially when we were looking for our trip when we went out west. Most campsites that we stayed at were around $140, $150 each. So I don't know, I just thought that was kind of ridiculous because you're literally bringing your own house. And the fact that you have to pay over $100 a night when you're bringing your own house to stay somewhere just kind of seems a little crazy. I don't know. That's just me. Maybe I'm just cheap. When we went out west, we stayed in all KOAs, which I know are like kind of a chain and they're a bit more expensive. But they were nice, but they were expensive. And even a lot of the like private campgrounds, we stayed at a local KOA here. They're over $100 a night for a campsite, which I think is kind of crazy considering you'd bring your own house when you could stay at a hotel for $120 a night. Maybe that's just me being cheap. I don't know. There are cheaper campsites, which I'm actually going to move to next. That's going to be my segue to the next one. Number 6 is that state parks are by far the best campgrounds. Those are my favorite. Maybe not everybody, but my favorite campgrounds to stay at are the state parks for sure. We have one near us. It's actually a half hour from our house. It's right on the beach. I absolutely love that campground. The only thing is that it's tough to get a spot sometimes. But it's $35 a night, and it's a nice campground. And it's the state park campgrounds are definitely where it's at. Up in New Hampshire, they have a lot of them in the White Mountains. That's where I used to camp before I got a camper. Every year for the past 10 years, me and my friends, we go up there and we camp for at least one weekend a year, and we always bring tents and stuff. But you can bring a small camper there. That applies to why bigger isn't always better, because you can't fit big campers there. But yeah, state parks are really where it's at. That's our favorite, for sure. We have a rental house in New Hampshire, which a lot of times we don't stay at the house because it'll be booked on the weekends, but we'll take our camper up to New Hampshire and stay at one of the state parks that's like 5 minutes from our house and camp right in the area that our house is at. So it just ends up actually saving us money to go camping next to our house versus staying at our house and missing out on rental for the night. But definitely strongly recommend looking at state parks in your area, because those are the best bang for your buck camping-wise, that's for sure. There's a lot of them around. Sometimes they're kind of under the radar and tough to find, and people don't really want to give them up because they're kind of hidden gems, especially some of them, because they're not really super advertised. But the state parks, definitely recommend looking into them if you're looking for the good places to camp. Another thing that really we screwed the pooch on the first year that we got our campers. I think we bought our camper in April or early May. We didn't get it registered until May. And the thing about campsites, especially the good ones, is that you need to book the campsites pretty far in advance, especially with the good ones. With the good campsites, you need to book them usually 4 months to a year in advance, which is absolutely crazy. I didn't realize that. When we bought our camper in the spring, all of the good campsites were already booked. Our local beach campsite that we really like going to, we can only get like weekend spots at that campground in like May and then like October. So we kind of missed out on the entire summer of camping there because we just didn't know, we didn't have a camper, so we couldn't book any campsites in advance. That's super common, especially when we went on a trip out west. I booked all those campsites in advance. The good state parks, you definitely need to reserve your campsite in advance, especially if you want to get the good sites. You'll notice that when you go to book a campground kind of late, there'll be a few sites open, but those are usually the crappy sites. I mean, it's better than nothing, but the people who go there all the time and know the system of like when you need to book to be able to get a campsite, they know the good spots. So it'll be the kind of the bottom of the barrel stuff at the end, last minute. I mean, it's better than nothing. Definitely try to plan things in advance. For someone like me, who's kind of like a last minute impulsive guy, especially when it comes to like trips and going away, I don't really plan things, and that's tough for me to do. That's kind of when I got a camper, I thought I could just like grab it and go whenever and just have a spot for me at all times. It wouldn't be hard. I could just reserve something quick, but that's not the case. You definitely need to kind of do a little bit more planning. Number 8 is that the small, like, private campgrounds, you have to call them for availability and to book, which I guess just maybe my generation is I don't like talking to people on the phone. So calling someone to book is just kind of inconvenient. I remember when we were looking into places to stay out west, I called like 6 or 7 campgrounds and nobody had any spots. And it was just super discouraging because it's just an extra step that if you just had an online thing, you could just check. So I kind of ended up veering towards campgrounds and that you could check the availability online. That's what I found easier, and that might have been part of the reason we ended up staying at KOAs, just because their like reservation system is much more simple and you don't have to call anybody. But that's just a personal thing for me. I've also stayed at campgrounds up in New Hampshire that are small family campgrounds that you need to call and reserve. And it's really not that bad, but when you have to call a large amount of them and you're having a hard time finding a spot, it's discouraging to have to call 6 or 7 people just to get put on hold and have them tell you that there's nothing available. But that's one thing that I didn't realize. I thought it would be like hotels and like Airbnbs where it's just easy. You just put in your dates and you can find stuff. But that's not really the case, especially with the smaller campgrounds. Next thing is the campground Wi-Fi is usually pretty unreliable. If you're someone who needs to work on the road, or if you just need to be connected at all times, I wouldn't rely on it. When we stayed at the KOAs, they have Wi-Fi. You can get connected, but it's really not reliable. If you're trying to stream or do anything that like actually matters, I would recommend bringing your own form of internet, which we have Starlink, which is what we used on our trip. It's kind of expensive, but it definitely is the best way to get internet when you're camping. It's just something to consider if you need to be connected when you're camping. Obviously, some people want to just get the heck out of life, be in the woods and not be connected to anything, which some of my favorite campsites have no cell phone signal, and that's part of the reason why they're my favorite campsites, is because I don't want to talk to anybody. Although now they have the satellite texting on your phone, which I was completely shocked last time I went camping. But it's kind of nice because I can just text my wife and be like, hey, I'm here, I'm not dead. And that's it. That's all I really need to do is that point. I don't really want to stay connected that much, but just if there's an emergency or anything, it's nice to be able to get in touch with somebody. But satellite texting was kind of cool. But yeah, campground Wi-Fi, not very reliable. Wouldn't count on it if you 100% need it. All right, number 10 is that there's a lot of people at most campgrounds. And that's kind of something that surprised me. When I think of camping, I think of woods and outdoors. But again, this might be a Northeast thing just because it's just much more populated than a lot of the areas where people camp, like in the desert and out west and stuff like that. Every time we go to a campground, especially someone like me who has a full-time job, is working during the week, who goes camping on the weekends, it's busy. And that's just something I didn't expect. When I go camping, I want to get away from people and go into nature. So when I show up at a campground and there's 2 people on either side of me within 20 feet, that kind of sucks, and it's not the kind of camping I like. So definitely once you get into it, you'll find your favorite campgrounds, and you can choose your campgrounds. And sometimes you can choose specific sites at campgrounds that can make it feel more private. Once you're a regular and you kind of do a little tour of the campground, you can see which sites are the best and which sites you'd want to stay in. That's something that can be useful for that too. All right, this next one might be a little bit disrespectful to my older viewers, if anyone's on here. So most people who stay at campgrounds are much older than I am. I'm 28, so 2 years ago when I did my trip, I was 26. And I noticed at campgrounds, it's usually older or retired people. That might just be because my hobby is a hobby that old people like. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're kind of a person who goes camping to socialize and be around people your age, campgrounds, you might have a harder time finding that because a lot of the people at the campgrounds will just be older. Again, not necessarily a bad thing, just something I observed. Part of the reason might have been because my trip that I did was basically every retired person's dream trip, which is a good thing. Maybe I have a similar mindset to retired people, but definitely as being someone in your 20s at a campground, you feel a little bit out of place sometimes. I mean, it's not like I'm being judged or anything, but you just notice that everyone there is a decent amount older than you are. Not really a bad thing, just an observation. Just surprised me once I started camping and I realized that everyone at the campgrounds was usually in their 50s, 60s, and even 70s. Something I didn't expect. Well, actually, you kind of expect it, but you don't realize how much it actually is until you go camping. The 12th and final thing that shocked me about camping was that camping dealerships are not your friend. I had a terrible experience at one camping dealership and a mediocre experience at another one, which led me to ultimately buying my camper secondhand. We went to Camping World at first to buy a camper, and they tried to screw us over, man. It was insane. I mean, I'm a pretty cheap person, and I spend my money very precisely. So when I think I'm getting screwed over, I can get a little angry and kind of be a little spiteful, which I ended up being in this case. But we went in to look at one of the Coleman campers, which is basically the equivalent of what we have now. And I think the sticker price on it was like $12,000, and they ended up adding in over $3,000 in fees, and that's before the sales tax. So, I don't know, it's just insane. I didn't expect that. I got in the door seeing the list price for $12,000, thinking I would pay maybe around $12,000, $13,000, because usually you can negotiate them down a little bit, and then you have all the taxes and stuff like that. But they ended up wanting to charge us another $3,000 in fees. It was a complete ripoff. And I ended up leaving and just being mad. So I ended up leaving and not buying a camper through them. And even after I left, the next couple days, they'd call me every day or two and kind of lower their offer down $100 or two. And every day, and honestly, it got to the point where I was just so, like, just didn't want to even give them the deal, even if they got me to the price that I wanted, just out of just spite and just being sick of dealing with them. So definitely don't trust camping dealerships, especially Camping World. We went to another camping dealership, which really wasn't that bad. They did charge fees, but at least they were upfront about the fees, and we were almost going to buy one from them until we found this camper used. We ended up buying, this is a 2021 Gulfstream Friendship, which had some really sweet off-grid features to it, like the gas fridge, which the Coleman didn't have, and also propane heat, which the Coleman didn't have. The Coleman only had electric heat and an electric fridge, which for someone like me who likes to camp off-grid, that was a big feature. So we ended up getting this for a couple $1,000s cheaper than the brand new Coleman would have been. Granted, this is used, but this is kind of I think this is a higher quality camper than the Coleman, but that's what we ended up doing. And last but not least, applies to camping dealerships being scam artists. For the love of God, don't finance a camper for 20 years. That's insane to me that they offer that, and it seems like that might be the worst financial decision any human being could make, is to finance a camper for 20 years. That's nuts. Campers don't last 20 years. They're really not built to last that long. They're just usually depreciation machines, and if you know that when you're buying one, then you can kind of minimize it. But that was the last thing that when I was getting into the Camping World, it's called Camping World, but when I was getting into camping and trying to buy a camper, that was just shocked. I couldn't believe when they charged $3,000 in fees. And it ends up that that's actually a relatively normal thing that they do, and some people just accept that. But I was definitely not okay with that. Alright everybody, I hope you enjoyed this different type of video, kind of talking about my experience with camping. And obviously I'm talking about tow-behind campers, not my truck campers. That's a whole different type of camping. But this is just me talking about my experience getting into camping and starting camping, so that anyone who wants to get into camping, or maybe they just started getting into camping, maybe you came to these same conclusions that I did. These are things that you kind of didn't expect. Some of them might be specific to my area in the Northeast, just because it's more populated and the options of camping, it really isn't as much. And just, it's not as much good campgrounds to work with, I feel like. If anyone has any good campgrounds that they like in the Northeast that they'd recommend, feel free to comment. I'm always looking for new places to go camping. definitely going to be using it this year, especially since we had a newborn. So camping is kind of going to be one of our few options for going away. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Leave a like, subscribe, anything like that is very much appreciated. Even just watching it, I appreciate that as well. Thank you very much. Today's actually New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year. I don't know when I'll upload this, but hopefully everyone has a great year and a great day, and I appreciate you watching. Thank you.